Some of the first video games were top-down racers. The idea predates video gaming, really, with mechanical racing simulator toys and electric slot car tracks. So the idea of racing cars was an obvious early choice when figuring out what to do for early arcade machines. Atari's Grand Track 10 is considered to be the first racing video game, released in 1974. Sprint 2, the 2 meaning two-player rather than a sequel, debuted in 1976. By 1978, there was an 8-player version called Sprint 8. Most 1980s arcades had at least one multiplayer racing game with a bunch of steering wheels attached to it, including one of the all-time most successful, 1986's Super Sprint. Heck, even the Atari 2600 had Indy 500 with a special driving controller. While isometric and top-down racers have continued to be released, recent decades have seen them positioned more as retro throwbacks or low-cost, low-quality mobile and PC games. Modern racing games tend to be technological graphical showcases. Some of the most lifelike visuals in gaming can be found with Forza, Gran Turismo, and Need for Speed. But the idea of simple racing as a local multiplayer game continues, and NeoSprint aims to be a particularly good one of those with a ton of game modes, and the ability to make and share your own tracks online. There's a version of this review that focuses on the just okay but not great racing. There's a version that looks at the whole package. The former gives this game a middling to negative review score, while the latter recognizes the potential of the track builder and finds the fun. There's nothing wrong with the racing in NeoSprint, really, it's just that this kind of racing game has never really been my thing. I found the driving part of NeoSprint to be okay, somewhat frustrating due to my computer opponents, and the gameplay somewhat dull. There was also a strange acceleration bug where I'd hold down the gas and it just wouldn't go until I pressed the button again. I also ran into some poor game performance on the VCS, especially when opting for the more zoomed-in perspective of the race. The traditional full track view didn't have the slowdown and poor frame rate of the zoomed-in view, and is probably the way to play NeoSprint. I had the most fun making and sharing tracks, which you can find in the online track database under MPG 1 and 2. Each track took about a half hour to make, and putting them together was easy once I figured out how to place things vertically on top of each other, and I sorted through the mechanics of using the interface. It didn't take long to start building a decent track. You'll want to know that pushing in the left stick raises and lowers the vertical level you're building on. This is key to figuring out ramps, spirals, and turns. You can also decorate your track, set the time of day, and determine the default camera angle by rotating the level prior to saving. Once you've completed a track, you have to be able to do a lap of your own creation in order to verify it, at which point you can upload the track to the player creation database. Finding a user-created track is as easy as searching, sorting newest to oldest, or selecting the most liked. Liking a track helps get it in front of others, similar to liking this video, which I'd recommend you consider. NeoSprint initially came out in October of 2023 in a very different and quite a bit worse state than you see it in this video. The game got a massive update in February to overhaul its presentation, graphics, and gameplay, and all of the changes improved the experience. I found the game upon initial release to be largely unplayable and not at all fun. This new update fixed many of the issues, and the game's an easy recommendation for people who like this kind of racer. Another recent addition is added support for the classic joystick, which is exciting in theory to be able to steer with the twist functionality, although in practice I found the steering to require too much twisting to really feel good. You can adjust the sensitivity, and on high it was close to what I'd want, but even so I could never figure out how to drift brake when using the classic, and I found drift braking to be required in order to succeed. Sadly, NeoSprint's not the must-have it seems like it might be if you're a classic joystick fan. I ended up using the modern most often. The single-player campaign experience is pretty good too, and the end-of-level boss races can be tricky to beat. Once you run through the campaign mode, there are tons of other modes to play, including a create-your-own Grand Prix, free racing, and time trials that pit you against a ghost car to beat an easy, medium, and hard time to get around the track. NeoSprint's developer is a small Indy Costa Rican studio called Headless, and they were able to secure the Sprint license from Atari to make the game. Its future is unclear. The game is debuting on the VCS as a so-called early access exclusive, although no plans to release the game elsewhere have been announced. I personally feel the game's good enough to get a wider release, and having the full Steam community making and sharing tracks could open the game up and really increase the fun, especially if the developers eventually allow for the ability to build much larger tracks than are currently available. The main motivation to complete the campaign is to unlock items for the track builder. I noticed the tracks are saved locally on your VCS. When I swapped VCSs, the game didn't recognize my saved tracks, although I could download them if I'd uploaded them just fine. Is NeoSprint great? Not really, in my opinion, due to the relatively clunky racing and somewhat chuggy game performance of the VCS. I think the track creator is pretty great though, and if you're a fan of top-down racers, you should definitely check NeoSprint out. I'd love to be able to race online against others and see online leaderboards for race time, most races won, and more. NeoSprint's currently $15 in the VCS store, although Atari has stated in its Discord and elsewhere that the price of the game is expected to go up when it leaves early access. Thanks for watching. I'll have more game reviews in the coming weeks, including a look at Mighty Math, Quamp 2, and more. Liking helps spread the word about the channel, and subscribing gets these videos in your feed. Have fun!